Welcome to the Fight Against Mediocrity podcast. My name is Kevin Kartchner, and a year ago, I left my corporate 9 to 5 to start the Fight Against Mediocrity program, where we help people create their own economy. Okay, so today I'm going to answer a question that someone messaged me on Instagram about in-person conferences. So if you don't know, for the last 2 weeks, I've been out of town. I was at Funnel Hacking Live in Florida and then at Ryan Pineda's Mastermind in Las Vegas. And he's like, "Kay, real question. I'm wondering what value you get from the conferences and hanging with them that you don't get from consuming what they put on the internet." He was talking about Ryan Pineda. Is it different material? Is it the experience? Is it the notes you take and the engagement you have because you are focused on what's in front of you? And I could tell his question was sincere. And stick around, because at the end of this, I'm going to share the best conference that I recommend for people out of all the dozens and dozens of conferences and events that I've been to. So stick around for that. So here's what I said to him, and it kind of starts off a little bit different. My first conference that I went to was when I was 11 or 12 years old. It was a Home Builders Association meeting in St. George, Utah that my dad took me to. It was an event, I guess, Utah Home Builders Association. And I remember specifically listening to Brian Dodge. And if you haven't heard of him, he owned the company that for a little while would schedule the speaking engagements for Tony Robbins and a bunch of those other high level people. And what was really cool is at the end of the event, my dad and I walked up to him and said, "Thanks, we loved it." I still have the packet that he gave us. That was 16 years ago. And he's like, "How old are you?" I was like, I'm 11, 12 years old. I can't remember exactly. He's like, "Man, I wish I would have come to something like this when I was your age." He's like, "Here's a book. I want to give you this book and I want you to read it and it'll change your life." And the book he gave me was The Richest Man in Babylon. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it. It talks about, well, I won't go into that, but it's a really good book. And he gave it to me, and that impacted me. That had a huge impact on me as far as events go, in-person events. Because and fast forward a few years, when I was 24, money was tight. Or 25, I was an accountant. I was making around $60,000 a year, and I didn't have the money to spend $1,500 on a ticket, $500 on a flight, $1,000 on a hotel, a couple $100 on food. And so what I did was, when they'd have events, if they had a live recording, a live version where you could watch it online, or a virtual option, or a recording, I would always just buy that. And my logic was, I can't afford to go in person. I can't afford to go do that. And it's basically the same information, right? That was my thought process. Like, it's the same information if you go in person or if you just buy the recording. That's where I was completely out of this world, just plain flat wrong. It is not just about the information. And I learned this when I fast forward a little bit. I got invited to an event. I paid $1,000 to go. It was in Miami. And what I found, and it clicked for me on day 2, is I was there. The information was basically the same as I would have gotten online. I had to pay for the ticket, had to pay for the flight, had to pay for the hotel. But what was amazing is I walked away from that event with the contact information of like 10 to 20 people who were in the same spot as me. They were, ambitious. They were driven. They were wanting to make a change in their lives. The friends and family thought they were crazy. And they were there because they were like me. And so what I found is, if you want to connect with people who are going through similar things, who are growing a business, who are, whatever they're doing, you want to go to the events, because when you go to an event, you invest time, money, and energy. And you want to be around other people who invest time, money, and energy, because only the best of the best high quality people invest time, money, and energy into something. And so logically, if you want to be around the best people, get yourself there in person, and you will surround yourself immediately with a group of high quality people who are pursuing more in their life. That's just plain and simple number one. And so I had to learn that the hard way of years of not going to in-person events. And now, when there's a virtual option and an in-person option, I always choose the in-person option. I actually just signed up for one. It was $10,000. It's an entrepreneurship coaching program. You have to be making a certain amount to be able to qualify for it. I think like there's a $500,000 plus and then $1 million plus. I was able to qualify for the $500,000 plus in your business. And anyways, they had a virtual and an in-person, and the in-person is like at the worst times. There's 4 of them over the course of 10 months. The hotel that they are having a stay at is like $500 a night. And so it's expensive and it's time consuming, and I have to get flights and all this stuff. But I just keep thinking, I'm never going to connect with people the same in a Zoom room as I am sitting next to them, asking them about their business. And case in point, I spent like $4,000 or $5,000 5 months ago to go golfing with Ryan Pineda. If you don't know who he is, he's a big real estate guy, a big real estate investor, has $250,000, I think like 1 million overall, or like 1.7 million followers on social media in all. And he's accumulated those over the last 3 years. And I went golfing with him because I wanted to learn how he did that, how he'd built his brand so fast. And I was amazed that he was only charging like $4 or $5,000 to go golfing with him. And so I went to Las Vegas, traveled there, booked a hotel and everything, went golfing with him a half a day. And now he's been on my podcast. I have his personal number. He texted me and said, dude, how'd you like the event? Thanks for coming. And that relationship would have never come about over messaging. You just can't. And so get to live events. Now here's the caveat. A lot of people hear this and they say, any event is great and I should go to as many as I can. Here's the caveat. I would look at what are my top 3 goals for the year, what skills do I need, and what conferences teach those skills, or which conferences attract the people who are going to help me get to my goal. And then I would book 1 per quarter, at least. If you want to be a little more careful with your time, at least 2 a year. But I think, 2 to 4 a year is your sweet spot. Another trick that I need to share with you guys is when you go to an event, the biggest mistake I made for so long is I'd go to an event, I'd learn a ton, and then I'd come back and I'd be right in the thick of things, like right in the thick of my business, right in the thick of work, and I wouldn't make time to apply what I'd learned. So now every time I go to an event, I book the next day after I get home for only applying what I learned. I highly recommend that. Okay. So which event do I recommend the most? So I'm actually going to do a small twist on this. I actually recommend my own event the most, Create Your Own Economy Conference. We're hosting it in April of 2023. The reason I say that is because there's just something so cool about that community, the Fight Against Mediocrity community, getting together. And there are people who had breakthroughs. There are people who have, it was 5 months ago, they've doubled their revenue since. There are people who had huge breakthroughs in their life, and people who brought their families, because I try to make it a family-friendly event. So selfishly, that's the one, but I know what you're thinking. Kevin, of course you're going to say that because it's yours. So the one that isn't mine that I recommend is actually Funnel Hacking Live, the one that I just went to. And the reason I say that is because it's a good mix of business and self-development, and it's family-friendly. And not all events are family-friendly where you could take your kids, your wife, your grandparents, and be uplifted, learn a ton, and also have a ton of fun. And it also was just a great learning experience to how to run a great conference. So that's the one I'd recommend. Thank you so much for listening to this. If you're interested in the Create Your Own Economy Conference, check out my social media. We have the links there, or go to cyoeconference.com to grab your tickets. Love you guys so much. Have a great, great, great day. We'll catch you next week.